Abuja, which was planned to be Nigeria's befitting federal capital territory, was spawned in 1975. The site was chosen for its location at the center of the nation, its small population, among other reasons. To this purpose, a master plan was developed. However, due to lack of committedly following the master plan, Abuja now has an urbanization and housing inadequacy. The most vulnerable is that the urban poor had to arrange on their own where to live, and that resulted in shanty settlements, hence spatial dialectics, informal volumetric and unvolumetric combination, now called the spatial house, open house, or house without limit. The Abuja Master Plan was elaborated to put in place sustainable urban spatial environment for all groups and activities to be carried out in the capital territory. It provided low-income settlement areas to be built by the government and occupied by the public servants. The private sector servants did not appear to be properly provided for. The current Abuja housing settlements are not integrated. However, while we have a supposed housing deficiency, there are still a lot of unoccupied buildings. This will be our focus on Dateline for today. Thank you for joining. I am Ayuba Ilya. Now, before our discussions, let's take a look at this report.
Families face fights for survival in makeshift homes, while young people spend most of their income paying house rent without an option to save for the future. Every day, the number of people struggling to make a living from makeshift homes is increasing due to the ever-growing inflation. The National Bureau of Statistics says Nigerians' inflation rate increased to 19.64% in July 2022 alone, throwing dozens of families into difficulty. Halima Isa is a petty trader and a mother of 10 who has been living in Abuja for 15 years. She cannot afford to pay for a house and lives in a makeshift shelter made of zinc. I am a petty trader. I sell food by the roadside to support my family income, but we are still struggling with poverty. I pray that my life and that of my family change for the better, but from the look of things, I am losing hope. Over the years, she has worked hard to train her children in school to guarantee a better future. But the vision she hoped for and looked forward to looks blurry. Every day I go out and see all these beautiful houses. I pray to God to provide the same for my family or for my children in the near future. That is why I work hard to train my children in school for our life to improve for the better. Some young people between the ages of 30 and below lament that house rent takes more than 80% of their yearly income.
I think the most high is the house rent, because the house rent is really something else right now.
What we are getting is very little and everything is expensive.
The rapidly growing population and constantly rising inflation is dimming the hope of low-income earners that they can own a decent home. The population of homeless people in Abuja is projected to reach 5 million mark in the next 1 year due to high cost of living.
All right, thanks for staying. Now with us in the studio to talk about this is Ebuka Anichebe, a real estate consultant. Thank you so much for joining us on Dateline.
Thank you very much, Ayuba.
Yeah, good to see you. Well, Abuja, it's the nation's capital indeed, but owning a shelter in the FCT is such a big problem. Why is it so?
Well, one thing, costs. The costs of actually purchasing a two-bedroom in Abuja today, average is 35 million naira. That's out of reach for many Nigerians. And so you have a situation where people are building, developers are still building, but they're building for the few well-to-do individuals, leaving the rest to languish and live in shanties and outskirts areas. So that's, first of all, is costs. And cost is a function of two things. Number one is the cost of land, and number two is cost of construction. And so what we need to be talking about now is what factor do we have under control? If it's going to be the cost of land, how can we reduce the cost of actually purchasing land for development to the barest minimum so that we can democratize this house ownership here in Abuja?
So what's the process involved now in acquiring lands? I mean, this is one area that a lot of people have fallen prey in the past, in the process of trying to acquire land and all that. Sometimes they are being defrauded and all that. So the process itself, is it the type that can actually guarantee people to access the lands, you know, in a much more affordable manner?
Well, I won't say affordable. Getting lands is two ways. So either you are allocated land by the FCDA, right? You apply for it, you're allocated either residential land or commercial land for whether a school, hotel, whatever purpose you apply for. That's one route, okay? It's not for everyone because, I mean, there's only so many lands that can be allocated to private individuals, and that's at the behest of the minister. The second way is by you acquiring land. Now you can do that, and I can buy a property from you and today and go and register my power of attorney at Aegis and pay a nominal fee, which I think is 500,000, and that will be that. Okay, it shows that I now own this, so anybody coming in the future can run a legal search, and that's ownership from Ayuba to Ebuka is well documented. So, but that is not everywhere. That is Abuja's own unique thing that we have, right? Because we already have GIS and data management systems for that purpose. Unfortunately, for the rest of the country, that isn't really the case. So I think for Abuja, that's documentation, and if you want to do due diligence to acquire land or transfer title deeds, it's really not the problem here.
So, but why is it so rampant then that we have people, you know, having these fraudulent experiences sometimes when they acquire these lands? You come maybe a month later or two, you know, sometimes you find someone else is now raising a structure there.
Yes, so FCT lands, not necessarily ones in Aegis. So when you have Lugbe, for example, or Idu, you still have the issues of double allocation, and it's simply because they've not been captured in Abuja geographical information systems. And so people can come there and say, oh, this is where my property starts and stops, but you really can't tell because the cartography that was used previously to chart those documents are not exactly in line with modern day technology to avoid that, oh, this is where your land stops and this is where it starts. So that's number one. Secondly is also the matter of people, a lot of people buy estate lands, right? So you come and buy into estates that's already there, and they may not be capturing their information really well, right? So somebody leaves the company and somebody else comes to take the job, and they go and resell a land that has already been sold to somebody else simply because they haven't been able to capture it on the system. So you have those kind of small issues.
So for an organized system as such,
yes,
you know, you are buying a land in an estate.
Yeah.
You would expect some level of, you know, coordination and
you'll expect
documentation
that,
and all that.
You'll expect that. Unfortunately, it's not being properly regulated. People come up today and they're not members of REDAN, for example, Real Estate Developers Association of Nigeria. They're not members of that, but they're building and they don't look at the fine details. The moment money starts coming in, they go haywire and go to Dubai without needing to do the needful in terms of this is where your land is, this is where your land stops, and everything is well plotted and charted, and there's beacons to show where each land starts and stops. So you still have those kind of issues coming up, especially not within town per se, but when you start going out of Abuja phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, you have those kind of issues.
Okay, how much of a problem is documentation for land? What are the processes that one needs to go through, you know, to make sure that, you know, everything is checked? Okay,
so assuming I wish to buy a property from you, the first thing would be to go inspect the property. Hopefully I will go with a surveyor so that you don't point somebody else's land and pass it off as your land. Because you may have the right title document, but show me the wrong location. So it would be my best interest to go with my own surveyor, get your documents go get a surveyor that can pull out the plot number from there, the file number and all of that, and it will show you what we call a CDP. And with the CDP, he can actually use his machine to show you exactly where this lies. So that's number one, finding out exact location. Then the second thing will be taking that land documents, going to apply for what we call a legal search, right? And to carry out a legal search, you do that in ages. You pay 20,000 naira, and that will be carried out on any documents you bring. That will require the person purporting to be the owner to bring the original documents, his passport photograph, right, to validate that he is the owner. And then Aegis gives you a report, a letter saying, validating that that is indeed the right owner and the documents are genuine. And if you do that, it's usually a 3-day process, but you won't have issues. The problem is when you see a deal that is too good to be true, and they tell you, oh, this land is usually 160 million, but the owner needs money, it's 50 million naira. And then you jump at it and you go and buy either a dot thing or you buy a C of O. Meanwhile, there's an R of O document somewhere, and the R of O is the root title document, and C of O is a different document. So that can become an issue.
Exactly. So that's the problem now. If you may just explain to us this C of O. Yes. There are some who have, who feel that getting a C of O is such a big issue. Most times for some of the lands that people acquire, they do not necessarily have C of O for it.
Yes.
And all that. So why is it so difficult to actually have that?
It's not. It's more expensive and it can be difficult, right? So there's a nominal fee for payments of C of O, and you should have paid up your ground rent, right? And there's a calculation for the cost of C of O, which matters. What matters then is the size of the land. And it's at the governor's or the minister's behest of every state to say what the premium for getting a C of O is. It's unfortunate that the C of O just basically is a certificate validating that you're the owner of this, but you cannot get a C of O unless you have an R of O, right? So the R of O is a root title document. However, the challenge where we see a lot of credit financing doesn't come to this is most banks will not give you loan, right, or accept an R of O as a suitable collateral. They want a C of O, but the C of O, acquiring that can be quite prohibitive in terms of cost. And then also you may pay and it won't get signed for years. Some ministers just can't be bothered. And so that bureaucracy can lead to what we call dead capital. There's lots of lands that are not being used. You're not using it for farming, they are vacant, they're empty. It yields nothing to anybody, right? Not to the owners, except in terms of entitlements. Oh, I have this big property that is worth so and so billion, right? But it's really not adding any value to society. And so something has to be done about it. A serious minister should be bold enough to say, hey, you know what? If you have vacant lands in so and so areas and you don't develop it by so and so time, then we will be forced to revoke it. And it's well within their powers. It's well within the powers. If they should do that, then people that are just land speculators and are not developing the land will be forced to actually partner with land developers. And it's again about demand and supply. If there's more supply in the market, the price will definitely come down because there's definitely the demand for it. 22 million housing deficits in Nigeria. And even out of the 22 million, if you look at the people that actually have houses, about 45 million as a last count, 45 million houses, built-up houses, 75% of those 45 million are subpar. They are old, they are dilapidated, they need rehabilitation, but that's all you have. So,
all right, so the thing is, we've had several housing schemes in Nigeria. I cannot count how many. We've had several, and all of that, yet we still have this deficit. If you look at, say, Abuja, for instance, a large number of people that work in Abuja, that's in the nation's capital, do not live within the city center. Most of them live far off, maybe somewhere in the area councils and all that. How can we change that? And why has the housing schemes not worked?
Well, I won't say it didn't work. It worked to the extent to which it was designed to, right? So, again, money comes in and rules the day. Abuja is experiencing a rush from people outside of Abuja. So there's a flood in Lokoja. Where are they going to come to? Is Abuja. there's insecurity in Kaduna, where they're going to come to? It's Abuja. So where there's insecurity, people tend to come to the state's capital as a means of succor and hope for security. And that's why we're experiencing a situation where people are increasing the cost of rent, even without repairing a single thing from year on year on year on. And old houses are costing so much. Now, many of those houses are even locked up, and they're built, but they're locked up and nobody's living there. Again, it's dead capital. Nobody benefits in a closed house. So again, policy must pursue innovation. Innovation cannot pursue policy. If the policy is that if you have an empty house, we'll still tax you regardless. We'll give you a property tax on an empty house, because if it was filled, somebody will be there, right? And then there will be, FCDA can collect tenements rates, AMA can collect environmental tax, DSTV can collect that. And it turns into a commercial use as opposed to just another dead capital.
So how is the problem of infrastructure also contributing to this issue of, high cost of shelter?
Well, if you look at Abuja, phase 3, phase 4, it hasn't yet been developed, right? And there are so many places that the government in the past have gone through concessionaries and giving people lands, and in the hope that they would bring infrastructure. And you have these kind of partnerships. However, very few have seen the light of day for many reasons. Cost, again, access to finance, credits, these are issues. But you do need infrastructure for a developer to come and build. He's not going to build in a place where people will be scared to even go there because they are scared about their cars being able to even get home. So that's something to look into. It would be nice if we had the Abuja Metro Rail already on, so that people can move to and fro regardless of whether you're living within town or living on the outskirts. If we had that, it would be easy for people to access more places. So that's something to look into when it comes to transportation. But roads are primary. Roads are primary. We still need to have a look into how can we build more roads in these hinterlands in order to encourage developments there. And then naturally, people would find cost of houses within town gradually coming down or stabilizing.
Well, thank you. We'll take a short breather, and then when we return, the discussion will continue on the program. Please stay with us. All right, thank you for staying with us. You are watching Dateline right here on Trust Television, reaching you from the nation's capital in Abuja, talking about the housing deficit in Abuja, the nation's capital. And I have in the studio Ebuka Anichebe, a real estate consultant, talking to us about this. So in the nation's capital, we have all these area councils, yep. Abaji, Buhari, and all of that. In terms of capturing those places and validating those other areas to enable developers to be able to move in there and have more structures, what do we need to do? Right.
I'm happy you touched on that topic, because it's something that people don't usually tend to talk about, and we focus so much on just the AMMC, Abuja Municipal, without looking at the other area councils where the lands there are actually cheaper. However, the problem there is lots of double allocation, so there's lots of fuzzy areas. Developers are even afraid to do joint ventures there because they're like, oh no, so much. So the question then is, how can Aegis play a bigger role and work with the area council chairman of these different places, whether it's Buhari or Lugbe, to say, look, let's harmonize this. It's going to be beneficial for everybody, and get it under check, because without that, you're going to keep having court cases, and the land is there lying fallow, and people are still complaining of high rental income. It makes no sense.
So do you think that we need to do some kind of legislation to change that? Because a lot of people have talked about the Land Use Act as being a major hindrance to making some of these things happen.
They may be. I mean, it could be also just be a bylaw, right? That on the area council, on the local government's level, they can pass a bylaw that says all lands to be sold that must be captured under, and they can come up with a name that is suitable for what Aegis does, right? But all lands should be captured in GIS form, right? Geographical Information System, so that now we know exactly, there's no point of Ayuba buys the land, Ebuka comes tomorrow and says, that's my land, I first got allocation paper. That should all be registered and open to everybody, the same way we have it in the MMC. If that can be done across all area councils, you will see the investments that you're looking for, Russian private sector investments will come in. Will come in.
Okay, so how can government partner with the private organization to make sure that more people have houses? You know, yes, we have this mortgage, federal mortgage bank,
yeah.
You know, which also touch on that. But how can we how can government partner to make more people have houses?
I think government is already doing a good job partnering with them, with the Federal Mortgage Bank. However, like I said, it's a function of the cost. So few people, especially people working in government, they find it easier to enter into mortgages, right, than the private sector and the low-income private sector. Although the government, again, in recent times did a National Housing Fund, especially around social housing. But I don't see how that program has kicked off yet, so I can't give you details on that, but I'm not seeing much traction in that regard. But the bottom line is, make lands affordable, make them accessible also to the right developers. We have too many people coming in and they're briefcase entrepreneurs, they're speculators. They have these lands allocated to them in hectares. I'm talking about 300 hectare lands, lying fallow. Nobody has done anything on it, and yet the hope when they were going into that kind of a contract was that, oh, we're going to build houses here. Then they'll come up with the issue, oh, there's no infrastructure, but you were supposed to provide infrastructure in exchange for the lands given. So there should be serious consideration given to who are we allocating these big estates projects to, and what is their track record, and how do we hold them accountable. If there's a need to review old agreements, then so be it.
Okay, you know, in recent times we've been experiencing flooding across the country. A lot of people are now, you know, rendered homeless as a result of this flooding. Experts have talked about issue of planning, urban planning, and how people build recklessly and all of that. How do we put a check on that?
Again, people need to do the jobs. I believe even in the COJAP, people were responsible for ensuring people don't build along the shorelines. But again, somebody was either by oversight or just ineptitude overlooked that. It's going to be really difficult to check, especially since most people don't have right title documents to the lands, and so they just find a space and build, and that's how it sprouts around. People keep building that way. Putting a check to it will require every governor putting a foot down and saying, look, enough is enough. You cannot build on sewage ways, you cannot put on drainways, you have to build according to this. But during political times, people tend to look away from doing the needful so that they can garner votes and not crosses. So I think that's it.
All right. So another issue, of course, the cost of building materials is major. What's the remedy? Are there local solutions to this?
Industrialization. There are. But to what extent? When it's just, you can mold blocks here cheaper, definitely, right? Cost of blocks can be cheaper. Cement could also be cheaper if Dangote decides for it to be cheaper, but those are things that are local. But then the finishing of the house, most things are imported, and that's when it gets really tricky. From the roof tiles to inner tiles to it's everything for finishings. So that's really,
are these things that we cannot do here, and what's stopping us?
If we have an industrial plan, if you're producing those things here, definitely they'll be cheaper. But then there's always a market for everything, so it really depends. I think if you look at the markets, people are now moving into savvy developers. They don't want to carry the burden of finishing houses, so they sell houses at carcass level, so that you, the owner, can then finish according to your taste and your pockets, because that's where the real cost component of most buildings come into, right? So you want a situation where Nigerians at least do the bare minimum, empower them with lands, allow land allocation to be more, I would say, democratic, more democratic, so that it's not like very few people can have 6, 7, 10 lands allocated to them and they go and do resell. No. If you ask people, if you ask me, I would say ensure everybody that has an updated tax record, either from their TCC or their personal tax, to be able to have allocated to them.
From time to time, we see the FCDA carry out demolitions in different parts of Abuja. And that's a problem. Sometimes you hear people argue that they got the legitimate documents for those houses, yet they are demolished because they are not according to the master plan and all that. So why do we keep having these experiences, and what will be the solution to that?
Well, people that have that issue, number one, they should go to court. You go to court, you will get your compensation, right? Unfortunately, what the law allows, what the Constitution allows, is for you to be compensated only for the improvements made on the land, not for the land itself, right? So if you build a house and the house is deemed to be 5 million naira worth in value, that's all you're getting. Doesn't matter if the land is 10 million naira or 50 million naira. That's all you're getting, the compensation for the house itself. So go to court if you feel you had title documents and you are given approval to actually build there, and still you got demolished. Well, I can assure you most of these people didn't have building plan permits, right, before they went and built there. So definitely one new administrator will come and needs to do the needful regardless.
And you know, people, there's this reluctance usually when notices are given for demolition. Sometimes people tend to feel, oh, well, it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
And then eventually
it happens.
It happens. Yeah. And then, you know, we are the press. We carry these stories sometimes.
It looks sad.
It looks very, very terrible, you know, rendering people homeless and all that. Sometimes even with people's, you know, domestic items in them, you have these demolitions happen and all that. Is there no better way of doing this?
Well, there are better ways. I mean, you want to have them relocated safely, right? However, like you mentioned, people can be stubborn, and you give them first notice, second notice, third notice. Eventually, you have to book a date and get people to move to sites. You're not going to book a date and because of one person say, well, this mama. No, you have to do the needful because you're bringing in sister agencies to coordinate this type of activity. So a better way will be give longer dates, one. And if you're going to demolish people's house, have an IDP camp. Because, yes, they're going to be internally displaced people. Have a camp where they can do, and pass over the next 6 months until they can reintegrate or rent a new space. But that has to be done. It's a humane thing to do.
All right, thank you so much. It's a good place for us to end the discussion. We appreciate you joining us on Dateline for today.
Thank you very much.
And that's a wrap on our program for today. In case you are just joining, you can watch us on other social media platforms. And also remember, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel where we stream live 247. I am Ayuba Ilya. Our guests have been Ebuka Anichebe, a real estate consultant, giving us insight into the issues of housing in the Federal Capital Territory. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. See you next week.